Right. Well, I understand that we are now joined by ANC spokesperson Pule Mabe on the telephone. Mr. Mabe, are you with us this evening?
Good evening and evening to your viewers.
Wonderful, and thank you so much for joining us. I think everyone's still reeling from the decision from the Constitutional Court. What is the ANC's response? Are you disappointed?
No, well, I mean, we are studying the judgment. We do welcome the decision taken by the apex court in the land because it is consistent with what we shall have also raised in our application when we joined the IEC's application to the Constitutional Court in view of the recommendations made by Judge Museneke as it related to an aspect of elections being free and fair. One of the arguments that the African National Congress would have raised in its own application joining the IEC had to do with voter registration weekend. You'd recall that at that very weekend, the last voter registration weekend, is when we had experiencing the third wave, the start of the third wave on our shores, and there were a number of lockdown restrictions imposed, which restrictions made it impossible for parties to be able to conduct their gatherings, do campaign work, but also granting eligible voters the space to be able to register to be on the voters' roll. We can only claim to have had free and fair elections when each and every one of South Africa's people who is of a voting age have so participated in the process. What this does is that it does grant that kind of a space, but it also allows the IEC, working together with the relevant minister, to also be able to consider the possibility of opening up and adjusting their own timetable, especially because the proclamation has now been set aside, which now means that the minister must proclaim a new date of between the 27th and the 1st of November. In the intervening period, if consideration is made by the IEC, then allow for a voter registration weekend to be opened. Now, because, you know, there are simple rules that we all have to understand, that you cannot vote where you do not stay. Now, there are those that are going to universities. We had one candidate who will have registered to vote in Polokwane because at the time he was attending University of Limpopo. But during the period of campaigning and all of that, through a democratic and participatory process in the ANC, and him being an activist in that community where he lives, he was then nominated by the community, received overwhelming number of votes to be able to become their ward councillor candidate. Now, when you were registering him, you then realize that he is unable to be a ward councillor in that ward because you cannot participate as a ward councillor in a ward where you do not reside.
Got you. I have to jump in because Terry Telani said a very interesting thing just towards the end of my interview with him a moment ago. He was saying that because the election date now has to be proclamated properly, and it could be between the 27th of October and the 1st of November, he said that very likely may create a gap to reopen the registration period for candidates, which would mean that the problems that the ANC has had, and we know that they've been fairly extensive with registering your list with the IEC, you might have a second chance. Are you hopeful that that will indeed be the case?
Well, of course, while the environment does present that kind of a space, it is important to restate this point, that our joining of the application of the IEC had nothing to do with the councillor candidate registration process. It had everything else to do with elections being free and fair. Now, free and fair elections have got to fulfill quite a number of characteristics.
Yes.
You've got to make sure that all those that are eligible to vote could be able to participate in voting.
Yes, but I'm asking, sorry, Mr. Mabe, we're just running out of time, and it was simply about the candidate list issue.
Yes, but I thought you don't tell me how I need to answer.
I just didn't understand your answer at all. I wasn't sure if you understood my question.
I understood your question.
Oh, good.
But you don't prescribe to me what answer I must give.
No, I'm not. I was just clarifying, sir. Do continue.
I understand you. I answer you in the manner that I deem fit for the viewers that are listening out there, so that we could always give background on where the ANC comes from. To overstate it again, our issue was never been about the reopening of this for candidate selection. It's always been about elections being free and fair. And this is a point we raised in our application, because suddenly, if we fall into that space and say, oh, it does create space, what do? We are giving credence to some of the insinuations made by a leader of the Democratic Alliance, which was quite unfair on the integrity and credibility of judges. So we in the African National Congress have raised these issues because we're alive to the fact that there are a number of challenges that we are going to experience because of COVID-19. People have lost jobs because of COVID-19.
Absolutely.
There is in no way that COVID would not have had a dent in terms of how you run free and fair elections. Now, when a party like the ANC expresses itself in that way, it's because it wants to create space and room for everyone who wants to participate in that process to feel that they've been able to participate and that they've also been able to exercise their rights fully, because that is what democracy is all about. We can only become a truly democratic country when all citizens are given a fair space to be able to participate in and enjoy the privileges that comes with our own democratic dispensation.
Do you think that the ANC is going to want to reopen your case, because you launched a case at the Electoral Court to try and reopen that registration period, then you withdrew it. From what Terry Tselane is saying, what he seems to be saying is that you might not need to have to even go there again, because it might, in a sense, create a period where the registration of candidates, I'm talking candidates now, could partially be reopened. Is there any discussion at this stage? I know it's still very early to be crunching the legal ramifications, but does the ANC have a view on that?
Well, of course, the ANC will be able to express itself once it has concluded its special National Executive Committee meeting, which is currently underway. But you'll also remember that the ANC had on consideration in engagement with its own legal agents, took a view to withdraw that application at the Constitutional Court, because we said, because the argument we are advancing at the Constitutional Court is very much similar to the argument that wanted to advance at the Electoral Court, it was only fair that we allow ComCourt to pronounce itself in the manner that it has now done, so that having understood all of those, we could be able to now make a determination. Relevant electoral teams, legal team in the African National Congress, everyone now, the SGO, is now on overdrive to make sure that we fully understand and interpret what is now before us, and use the relevant election structures like the party liaison committees. Their comrades who represent the ANC, at the Comrade Beauty of Mayor, at the party liaison committee that is convened by the IEC, which is a multi-party forum, to then allow all of us to understand what are the next steps that are being undertaken by the IEC, given the judgment that has now been handed out by the Constitutional Court.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. And I know that the party is engaged in a special NEC and a Lekgotla this weekend, so I'm sure we'll be hearing more from the party in the next couple of days. Thank you very much, Pule Mabe, who speaks for the ANC.